It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen. Zombie Outbreak, New Mexico by Augustus Cordova. Part 1. But deep within a sunshed basin of New Mexico's desert, the Dry Mesa Reactor Complex was once a crown jewel of experimental energy research. Hidden behind chain-link fences and guarded by decades of government secrecy, it was rumored to house some of the most advanced and dangerous developments in nuclear physics and bioreactive technology. Officially, Mesa was decommissioned in the early 2000s. But those who live in the sparse communities surrounding the basin tell a different story. They speak of black helicopters circling the Mesa at dusk, of strange tremors felt beneath the earth, and of a low-frequency hum that pulses through the rocks long after sunsets. Those of us who still work there, well, let's just say we get paid well to not ask too many questions. The facility itself sprawls both above and below ground. Cracked access roads lead to wind-blasted hangars, radiation monitoring towers, and long-abandoned living quarters. Deeper still lie sealed vaults and laboratories shielded by meters of lead and concrete where whispered projects like Helix Core were developed under total blackout with mysterious associates like the Midas Institute. Despite being marked as inactive, sensor arrays at top nearby mesas still blink at night. Environmental teams who attempt to survey the area often report equipment malfunctions, disorientation, and occasionally missing time. Well, none of this mattered to us, though. This worker shift, take the money and keep quiet. I was halfway through my second cup of sludge, grinding out a double shift at Dry Mesa, the kind of place built back in the Cold War to survive the end of the world, when the lights gave a twitch. At first, no one even flinched. Power flickers weren't common, but they happened. This place had been designed to shrug off nukes and terrorist bombs, so a hiccup in the power wasn't supposed to mean anything. But this flicker, it didn't go away. The lower hum of computers spiked, screens jittered, and then everything cut. Dead silence, full blackout, until the emergency lights kicked in. Dull orange strips lit up low along the walls through the op center. The glow from a few surviving monitors gave the place an otherworldly pulse. "Backup journal kick in soon," Kurt said from the watch desk, voice steady as a metronome. G. Mayfield, 20 years in the trenches here, calm in a crisis. Usually that was enough to keep everyone from panicking. Not tonight. No, tonight the air felt tight. Wrong. I should have already, I muttered, eyes locked on the big observation window. Outside, beyond blast gray glass, the towers loomed. Giant concrete skeletons in the moonlight. Normally, you'd see steam rising. Proof the system was breathing. But tonight, nothing. Just stillness and black. I slid over to my station, checked the console. Red strobes blinked in an angry rhythm. Coolant flow disrupted. Reactor heat rising fast. Backup pumps were dead silence. I punched in diagnostics, but the screen stuttered and locked. I hit the keys harder. Pulse spiking. This wasn't some everyday bug in the system. Anyone got contact with control? G asked, voice clipped. Andrea, fresh out of training, shook her head. Internal lines are dead. External won't dial out either. Silence then heavy and corroding. Andrea tried her own phone, her face tightening. No bars, she said. It's like we've been cut off. Kurt checked his watch and had a slow exhale and then turned to me. Duncan, let's check the auxiliary generators. We need cool back now. We moved fast. Boots hitting the concrete like drum beats. The hallway felt endless. The kind that was built for war, not comfort. Steel concrete. Jarring shadows that never moved right. Every footstep echoed too long and too loud. We hit the heavy security doors, pushed through into the auxiliary sector. That's when I noticed it. An access panel on the wall, unlatched, breakers exposed, wires messed with. Someone had been in here. Someone who shouldn't have. Kurt caught it, too, muttering under his breath. That's against protocol. Manuel shut-offs locked for a reason. Before I could even reply, a sound rolled down the corridor, low and wet, like something dragging something heavy. Then footsteps, uneven, shuffling. G froze, flashlight up, but trembling. The noise was getting closer. Something breathing, but not right. Not human. Who's there? Kurt barked, his voice firm, but with a sharp edge of dread. No answer, just that sound. Sliding skin dragging weight, breath like broken glass. He swung the flashlight toward the corner. The beam caught movement, a silhouette, a man limping, slack arms, head cocked to the side like it was half detached. His steps were jerky and wrong, like his legs had forgotten how to work. Hey, I knew him. Was Don Lewis, night shift security. Well, his uniform was torn, streaked with something dark and wet. One shoulder was soaked, blood dripping down his arm, pooling at the wrist. When his eyes met mine, they were vacant, wide open, but there was nothing behind them. No fear, no recognition. Just a void. Hey, Don, what the hell happened? Kurt asked, his voice low and tense as he edged a step closer. But Don didn't answer. He just kept dragging himself toward us, slow and steady like he had all the time in the world and nothing left to lose. Gus stopped cold, his eyes narrowing as he got a better look at him. Don wasn't just hurt, he was wrong. His body moved like it was still deciding how to be human. Raised his hand instinctively. Don, stop right there. Talk to me. But Don didn't stop. He lunged. It wasn't fast, but it was vicious, direct, and terrifying. Kurt reacted fast, shoving me out of the way. Don's jaws snapped shut inches from Kurt's face with a sound that didn't belong to anything sane. I was pure animal. Kurt drove both hands into Don's chest, forcing him back hard. Don stumbled, wavered, and then came right at us again. Like the pain hadn't registered. Yeah, back off, Don. Kurt shouted, but Don wasn't hearing it. Either that or didn't care. He just kept coming. Kurt's eyes flicked to the left, grabbing a steel wrench from a nearby toolbox like he'd done it 100 times before. He looked at me, no words, just urgency, and I understood. I pulled the flashlight from my belt and gripped it tight as Don lunged again. Well, Kurt didn't hesitate. He swung and the wrench cracked against Don's scar with a sickening crunch that echoed down the corridor. Don's head snapped sideways at an unnatural angle and he hit the concrete hard, limbs twitching, mouth open in a frozen silent snarl, and then still ghosted over the body, chest rising fast, eyes locked on Don's broken form. What the hell is going on? We didn't have time to think. More footsteps, heavy, dragging, were echoing from the darkness down the corridor. Not just one, a group, accompanied by low moans, raw, guttural, and inhuman. Kurt grabbed my arm. Move now. We ran, boots pounding across the concrete as we barreled into the auxiliary room. Kurt slammed the steel door shut just as something slammed back from the other side. Thud, then another, repeated and violent. G threw the manual bolt and stepped back, breathing hard. We can't stay here, he said. We need comms. This is everywhere in the facility. We got to get help fast. I scanned the auxiliary room. The generators were dead, too. Not failed. Shut down. Sabotaged. This wasn't just some system crash. This had been planned. Maintenance tunnels, Kurt said, pointing to a heavy hatch set low in the wall. They're tight, but we stay off the main hulls. Whatever that was, whatever Dawn become, they're not down there yet. We hauled the hatch open. An aero metal ladder disappeared into pitch black shadows. G dropped in first, vanishing into the dark, and I followed, sealing the hatch behind us with a dull metallic slab. The tunnel below was hell, tight and suffocating, bathed in faint red emergency light that made everything look soaked in blood. Every breath, every step echoed like gunfight. G moved quickly and confidently. He knew this place better than anyone. After what felt like forever, he stopped beneath another hatch and pointed upward. This was it. Central Control, the brain of Dry Mesa. GMS, mainline systems, emergency ops. If anything still worked, then it would be here. Kurt twisted the handle slowly and quietly. The hatch creaked open and a wash of dim light spilled down. We climbed out into a room that felt like a graveyard. Screens flickered randomly. Papers and gear were scattered like a fight had broken out. A long black smear streaked across the control console near the emergency comm line. "Right, seal it," Kurt ordered, already heading for the phone. I dropped the hatch, locking it tight, then turned back to him. He held the receiver to his ear, jaw clenched. I could see it on his face before he even spoke. "Lions are dead," he growled. "Completely dead. Something or someone had killed all comms." Then, without warning, the radio hissed to life, cutting through the dead silence like a blade. We both jumped. A broken garbled voice crackled through the static. "Facility compromised. Multiple infected. Evacuate immediately. Repeat. Dry Mesa is compromised. Containment is breached. Evacuate now." Guard dropped the receiver. His face pale and eyes as wide as they could be at the message that kept looping. It was just robotic and cold. The truth we tried to not face just kicked the door in. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a power glitch. No, this was war inside our own walls. Deliberate, deadly, and spreading like wildfire. And now we were locked inside Dry Mesa and nuclear facility with no power, no way out. Something loose in the dark that didn't belong. Paced across the room, boots crunching over broken glass. The looping broadcast kept blaring, and each cycle was worse than the last. Each word dropped like a hammer. And then silence again, deep and suffocating. He stopped and looked at me, panic gone now, replaced with cold resolve. "Right, we can't stay here," he said, stepping forward and killing the transmission. The room was now completely silent. No radio, no hum, just the heaviness pressing down on us. "The arms are dead. Ours has been cut on purpose. Whatever's moving through this place, it's not stopping." His voice was now steel. "Well, if containment's really blown, then what's outside might be even worse." I nodded, swallowing hard. My eyes drifted across the wrecked control room. Blood smeared across keyboards, pulled beneath chairs, all of it fresh, still wet. Someone had fought to stay alive here, and they'd lost. Or worse, they didn't make it out at all. Kurt moved to a steel cabinet on the far wall, unlocked it with a key kept hidden on his belt. The doors creaked open to reveal emergency gear. Flashlights, batteries, medkits, gas masks, and 2 short-range radios meant for use inside the facility only. He tossed one to me and tested the other. Both worked. "Right. Take what you can carry," he muttered, throwing a heavy pack over his shoulder. I grabbed another, stuffing it with whatever I could find. First aid, backup power, and an extra light. Then he turned to the wall-mounted blueprint. The map of Dry Mesa. His finger traced a route. Admin sector. Security's holding out anywhere. It'll be there. He blueprint down and shoved it into a side pocket. Move fast toward the exit, stopping at the reinforced door. Go peer through the small blast-proof window. Beyond it, the corridor stretched out, bathed in a dying red glow. Just enough light to shape the dark. Empty. Quiet. Too quiet. Part 2. G undid the lock slowly and silently. The hinges moaned as he opened the door. We stepped out, weapons and flashlights ready. Beams of white light sliced through the gloom. Every shadow twitched in the corner of our vision. Every creak sounded like breath. The hallway extended ahead. Steel doors, grated floors, utility panels, and vents running like arteries across concrete walls. Then the stench hit us. Smoke, chemical sterilizer, and underneath it all the thick copper tang of blood. We recognized it immediately. We kept low, kept moving. Every step was a whisper. Every scan methodical. Kurt swept the flashlight like he was slicing through the dark, checking every doorway, every shadowed corner. Our breathing stayed low and steady. We were trained. It was automatic. We'd prepped for almost every kind of disaster you could think of. Reactor failures, chemical leaks, total system collapse. But not this. Nothing had prepared us for what we saw next. Up ahead, one of the lab wing doors was half open. Its reinforced steel bent outward like something had exploded from the inside, or something had forced its way in. Kurt threw up a hand to signal me. Halt. I froze mid-step as he crept forward, flashlight steady in his grip, slicing through the dark. He eased up to the busted lab door, scanned the inside, and then stopped cold. His body went stiff, his breath caught in his chest. I aged up behind him slowly, and then followed his stare into the room. The lab was wrecked. Tables flipped. Beakers and tools smashed across the floor. Blood-streaked papers clung to broken glass and metal. Looked like a storm had ripped through, violent and fast. And at the center of it all, slumped against a toppled filing cabinet was what was left of Dr. Alexandra Hobson, head microbiologist, one of the best. And now the corpse. The lab coat was soaked in blood, twisted around her body, torn up beyond recognition. Face locked in a final expression. Like whatever had hit her, she never even saw it coming. Around her, shattered vials littered the ground. Their biohazard labels, barely legible now, were cracked and peeling. Emergency research samples. Once sealed and guarded, now ruptured, leaking, mixing on the floor like a poisoned soup. Kurt stepped back, jaw tight, eyes burning. It started here, he muttered, his voice low and hard. Someone opened containment on purpose. Then before we could say anything else, a noise soft dragging from deeper in the lab. Jay snapped his fingers in a sharp signal. Lights out. We killed our flashlights, drowning ourselves in black, just the red flicker of the emergency bulbs pulsing in the distance. Neither of us moved. We didn't dare breathe. The dragon came closer. It was wet and slow, like something pulling itself across broken glass. Then moaning followed, the same sick inhuman sound we'd heard before. And then he appeared, a scientist in shredded biojug staggering into view, bathed in the weak emergency glow. His head drooped unnaturally, one arm limp and useless, the other twitched, reaching for nothing. His steps were slow and directionless, but he kept going like something dead with just enough left inside to move. He wasn't human anymore. But he wasn't dead either. Just caught somewhere in the middle, driven now by something else. He bumped into furniture, knocked over gear, but he never stopped. Never even paused. Kurt threw another hand signal, a side exit. We slipped away, quiet and fast, and left the thing behind without looking back. The hall twisted tight, maintenance tunnels carved for wires, pipes, and shadows, but not meant for people. Every footstep echoed, muffled by the steel and concrete. God, it was hell navigating, but at least we were out of the main corridors, out of sight. Kurt took the lead. He was sharp and focused now. Knew every turn, every access point. The deeper we went, the rougher it got. Bare metal floors, tangled wiring, rusted pipes running like veins through the guts of dry mesa. But it was safer down here, safer than the slaughterhouse we just left behind. Finally, the tunnels opened into a broader hallway. This was older, dusty, built for war. Faded military stencils still clung to the walls. Remnants of the Cold War when this place was truly prepped for the end of the world. The hallway stretched out into a sealed checkpoint. There were heavy doors, silent cameras overhead, but nothing moved. Kurt moved to the keypad and punched in a long-forgotten override. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the doors groaned to life, metal grinding as they split open, revealing the administrative wing. We stepped into the reception area. Well, empty desks, emergency lights flickering overhead, phones off the hook, chairs overturned, a low hum buzzed in the background, backup batteries still feeding a little power through the veins of the beast. Kurt ducked behind the main desk and scanned the security feeds. Most were just snow, dead screens, ghosts of what once had been, but two still worked. One showed the front gate barely visible in the flickering light. Dozens of infected were staggering around it like animals, slow and mindless, waiting. But the other feed was worse. Inside the reactor cooling control center, bodies sat slumped at consoles. Dead. Infected moved between them like scavengers. Heads twitching, arms jerking. No order, no plan, just chaos in motion. Kurt stared at the screen. So did I. That was it. That was the truth. Dry Mesa wasn't falling. It had already fallen. Kurt pulled back up from the monitors, his jaw clenched in stone. "We're not getting through the main gate," he said flatly. "Top side's gone, swarmed. The whole perimeter's blown." His eyes then darted around the room, landing on a faded evacuation map bolted to the wall. He stalked over to it, scanning it fast, finger tracing routes like he was already there. "Right. There's an old service tunnel beneath Sector 5, he said. "Maintenance access, not been used in years, but still on the books. Needs to a secured outpost, small, off-grid. We might find a comm link in there or a way out that's not crawling with those things." He looked back at me, something hard shining in his eyes, resolve which was barely masking the exhaustion. "It's a long shot, but it's all we've got." I gave him a grin nod, right? And then a smooth. Kay didn't wait. He shifted into gear, heading straight for the elevators on the far end of the admin wing. But when we got there, they were dead. Locked down by emergency protocols. Steel doors sealed tight. Without a word, Kurt pivoted toward a stairwell door cracked just enough to tempt you in. He kicked it open, revealing a black chute of stairs disappearing into the bowels of the facility. Flashlights cut weak beams through the dark, barely touching the heavy air curling around us like wet cloth. Each step we took echoed, too loud in this suffocating quiet. The deeper we dropped, the colder it got, like the place was draining the warmth from our bones. And that silence it pressed in, raising every trace of the world we just left behind. At the bottom, we hit a steel blast door marked Sector 5 Maiden's Access Only. Gu paused, laid a hand on the handle. The cold bit into his fingers, and we both knew whatever was behind that door might be worse than what we'd already crawled through. Took a deep breath, then twisted the handle and shoved the door open. What waited was a narrow tunnel, concrete walls slick with moisture, stretching out into blackness. This was our last way out, buried deep beneath dry Maya. The overhead lights were few and far between and flickered inside wire cages, painting the tunnel in jerky shadows. The bulbs gave off a sick amber glow, just enough to make you wish you couldn't see what was there. Gu led the way, slow and steady, every step like we were stepping into the jaws of something sleeping. We didn't talk, didn't breathe too loud. We just moved, listening to the echo of our own footsteps, the slow drip of some unseen water and the low hum of something ancient breathing behind the concrete. The deeper we went, the more the air turned. Was cold and dense. Every inch felt like another nail in the coffin of what used to be normal. After a while, the tunnel opened into a junction. Pipes thick, rust-choked, veined off in every direction. Kurt stopped, hit the wall with his light. There was a sign. It was old and rusted, almost erased by time. He held up the map from earlier, running a finger over it, eyes locked on the path ahead. I glanced over my shoulder, then nothing but the darkness behind us felt heavier than it had before. Kurt then gave a signal and we pressed on. The tunnel tightened again like the place didn't want us moving forward. The walls pressed closer. The stink of mold and diesel oil thick in the air. Typical under old complexes. But now it also reeked of rot, of abandonment, and of death. Then Kurt froze, hand up, dropped to silence. He crouched low, his eyes locked on something above, an overhead walkway. I followed his stare and swept my flashlight toward it. Two bodies were slumped against the far wall, half hidden behind rusted crates. Kurt crept forward, closer, and then stopped. He shone the light. Maintenance crew. Worn coveralls soaked in blood. Necks torn open, arms gashed deep. The kind of wounds that didn't come from accidents. I knew them. That was Dave Bennett and Angel Rivera. Used to crack jokes while fixing pipes. Regular guys, good guys. Now just another warning painted in flesh and silence. And in that moment, any illusion we had left that this was containable and survivable had died with them. Dry Mesa was lost. No matter how much I tried to lie to myself, that place was dead and buried. Kurt rose slowly like every movement cost him something and pulled me back from the corpses with a quiet urgency. "Let's keep moving," he muttered, his voice gravel thick and low. His flashlight hovered on the bodies for half a second longer, then swept forward into the dark. The tunnel stretched on, endlessly, choking us. Our bodies fell into a dull, steady rhythm, each step automatic and mechanical. Before long, the ground started to slope downward deeper. The air got heavy, pressing in on my ears until they popped. Kurt glanced back, caught the tension in my face, and gave me a short nod. He didn't say a word, but I knew he was feeling it, too. The quiet dread crawling up our spines, the kind you don't talk about because naming it makes it real. Eventually, the tunnel just stopped. A dead end. And in front of us loomed a huge rusting door. Paint peeled to hell. Flakes of red dusting the ground like dried blood. Stenkled across it in blocky black letters. Maintenance Outpost Sector 5. Kurt stepped up slowly, his hand brushing the metal. The latch was busted. Someone had forced their way through before us. He pulled it open and the hinges groaned like something waking up. Inside, weak emergency lights bathed everything in a sick yellow glow. The room was a mess. Racks of old gear, old crates, tools scattered like someone had left in a hurry and never come back. In the far corner sat a dusty comms panel, its screens dark and cables slack. We moved in slowly, light sweeping across forgotten corners. The silence in here was different. It was thicker like the air itself was waiting. And every tiny sound echoed. GE was fiddling with the console now. The hum of dying batteries and the drip 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 from the tunnel behind us. I kept looking back, couldn't help it. The door yawned open and the dark beyond it felt like a mouth waiting to swallow us. Kurt swore under his breath then, stepping back from the comms with clenched fists. "Dead," he growled, "cooked from the inside. Not an accident, huh? Someone wanted this place cut off." He ran a hand down his face, frustration flaring before he forced it down. "Well, we're going topside. This outpost should have a ladder access that leads up to a maintenance shed. If it's intact, we might be able to slip past the main gates." He swept his light upward and found what he was looking for. A steel ladder bolted into the far wall, stretching up into the shadows. Without waiting, he moved, testing the first few rungs before starting the climb. I followed, and the ladder groaned under our weight. Metal cold enough to burn skin. The shaft was tight, barely wide enough on my shoulders. Every few feet my elbow scraped concrete. Every breath felt stolen. Then, after what felt like hours, Kurt reached the latch. He twisted the lock. Well, it fought him, but finally it gave with a scream of metal. Moonlight poured in, pale and cold, carrying with it the accurate stench of smoke and burning fuel. Kurt climbed through and turned to me, offering a hand. I took it. We emerged into a maiden's garage, small and cluttered, half swallowed by shadows. Tools they scattered across the floor, abandoned mid-task. The air was sharp, the kind that tells you you're not alone. The door to the outside was hanging open, creaking as the wind pushed it back and forth like something out of a bad dream. We crept forward. Crossing the threshold into the ruined world above for the first time since hell had broken loose. Part 3. The sky was thick with clouds and the air stained a sick orange from the fire still burning near Farmington. The whole scene looked unreal, like a war zone someone had painted over with nightmares. From where we stood, we could finally see the full extent of Dry Mesa's death. Past the fencing, flames flickered across the landscape. Wrecked vehicles lay scattered like bones. Some flipped, some burned out. Shadows moved out there, figures dragging themselves silently through streets and fields. Up here, it was no safer than the madness we just crawled out of. G stuck to the walls, hugging the shadows, and I stared right behind him, my ears straining for every sound. They all now sounded like a warning shot. Somewhere around in the distance, someone screamed. A high, sharp note that cut off just as fast as it began. For the parking lot, the one where they kept the old trucks and maintenance vans. Few still sat there, their doors swinging open. The insides were torn up and stained. Kurt led us to a rusted pickup, peered inside, then waved me over. The keys were still dangling from the ignition like someone had dropped everything and just run. He slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine coughed, then roared the door shut, locking it on instinct. G shifted gears and eased us out of the lot. The truck's headlights cutting twin beams through the smoke and ash ahead. The narrow access road twisted through the mess. Crashed cars, scorched fences, and signs of people running without looking back. Figures rogged the sides of the road, drawn by the growl of our engine. Kurt punched the gas, swerving around them with practiced hands. They reached for us as we passed, arms limp and twitching, faces blank and broken. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Wasn't just Dry Mesa that had gone to hell. This thing had gotten out fast. Whatever started underground had torn through everything. The road spilled ahead, leading us toward Farmington, a city that once felt harmless, quiet, forgettable. Now it was a black silhouette in the distance, drowning in smoke and silence. Kurt clenched the wheel tighter and his eyes hardened. "We can't stop," he said, his voice like Ravel. "It's spreading fast. We need to find someone or anyone before it eats the rest of the country." I nodded but didn't answer. I just stared out of the window, watching the wreckage blur past like some sick slideshow. Dry Mesa was behind us, but the nightmare that was still very much alive. We kept driving, headlights cutting through smoke and dust like blades. Sometimes they caught figures just standing at the roadside, blank-eyed and swaying. Kurt swerved around overturned semis and burned-out sedans, never slowing down long enough for anything to catch us. The world outside looked unreal in that washed-out glow. Houses turned to skeletons, fields scorched black, gas stations gutted and still smoldering. 20 minutes out, Farmington's edges started to take shape. We hoped for survivors, or at least a radio. Town had always been the kind you could pass through without ever remembering the name, but not anymore. The half-collapsed police barricade stretched across the main road. Patrol cars sat abandoned, their windows shattered, doors hanging off twisted hinges. And the street lights overhead flickered in the haze like dying stars. Farmington wasn't quiet tonight. Was holding his breath, waiting to collapse. The silence was thick. A dead kind of silence that didn't belong in a town like this. One that usually buzzed even after dark. Wrapped around us like a shroud, feeling heavy and unnatural. Kurt eased off the gas, his eyes scanning the blockade ahead. The truck crept forward, its low growl slicing into the stillness like a blade. He edged past the crumpled patrol cars, headlights sweeping across shattered glass and twisted metal. Nothing stirred in the shadows. And the deeper we pushed into Farmington, the uglier it got. Stores were gutted, windows smashed wide open. The shelves inside had been picked clean by panic or hunger or both. Cars were stranded at intersections like forgotten bones. Doors left swinging open like people had just vaporized mid-step. Newspapers blew down the sidewalks in lazy spirals, catching the wind and vanishing into the dark. The whole place felt hollow, scraped clean of light. We kept rolling forward, slow and sharp-eyed. Our plan was basic. Find anything with a signal, a firehouse, some hospital, working phone, whatever. Something, anything to call out and warn whoever was still alive beyond this spreading hell. We turned on to Main Street just as a low, steady banging echoed from an alley up ahead. Kurt hit the brakes, the truck's lights cutting sideways into the dark. 3 figures were standing there, infected, slamming their fists mindlessly against a steel pharmacy door. No rage, no purpose, just that steady, dull rhythm. Kurt fled, and the truck surged forward, leaving them behind in the rear-view mirror. Still, their hollow pounding echoed in my head. A reminder of how fast the world had cracked. "Right, watch out for the fire station," Kurt said, his voice calm but clipped. "Should be about 3 blocks out. Might have backup generators, radios, people." I gave a tight nod, my eyes locked ahead, trying to pierce the gloom for any sign of that brick building. Then there it was, a low structure, squat and dark front bay doors. Was yawning wide like broken jaws. G slowed to a crawl and killed the lights, letting the engine idle. We watched and waited. Nothing moved, but from inside we caught the faint flicker of light. Backup power, maybe. We slid the truck into park and looked over. "Stay sharp," he said. "Quiet now. We get in, grab what we can, and haul ass. No stalling." We stepped out, the door shutting with soft thuds. Kurt moved first, flashlight in one hand, wrench in the other. I shadowed him, my eyes darting left and right. The streets were dead quiet. But inside, it was worse. This place had been hit hard. Gear lockers overturned, medkits torn open, supplies scattered across the concrete. Near the wall, a fire axe lay abandoned beside a desk soaked in dried blood. Girdle by it, brushing the patch with grim fingers. "Lieutenant Solace," he muttered. "Used to swing by dry mesa once a month, safety checks. Solid guy." Whatever had happened here, it didn't take long. He stood and made for the rear toward the dispatch office. The door was cracked open, swaying slightly like someone had just left it. Kurt nudged it with the wrench, flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. Inside, the radios were still alive, whispering static. He moved fast, flipping switches, turning dials, searching the bands for a signal. Anything human. I stood in the doorway, flashlight in a death grip, keeping watch on the silent, empty garage. Every nerve was tight in my body, waiting for something to move in the dark. After a few gut-churning moments, Kurt finally caught something. A voice, merely a whisper under the static. He twisted the dials with jittery fingers, trying to lock it in. The signal sharpened, just immediate evacuation. Infection spreading fast. Albuquerque lost. Santa Fe dark. National Guard unable to respond. Civilians urged to avoid main roads. Find isolated shoulder. CDC containment failed. Kurt looked up, his eyes wide, stunned like he'd just been sucker punched. But the voice kept going, spitting out a roll call of claps. City after city crumbling under the same nightmare. Well, it wasn't just us. The whole damn region was circling the drain. The tiny thread of hope we clung to, that maybe someone out there could help, had snapped in an instant. We just stood there numb, the truth hitting like a freight train. Then movement in the garage bay shattered the moment. 3 infected had crept in, drawn by our lights and the radio's static hum. Gook killed the volume, but it didn't matter. They'd seen us. No room to run, no room to hide. It was fight or die. He snatched the fire axe off the floor and motioned sharply. "Move." They charged the first one, swinging hard. The axe hit bone and dropped it cold. Another lunged at him, teeth gnashing. I moved without thinking, flashlight smashing into its skull. It reeled back and slammed into the wall. And we ran, no hesitation, threw ourselves into the truck, door slamming just as Kurt twisted the ignition. The engine growled awake, headlights catching more infected spilling from alleys and doorways, pulled in by the noise we'd make. Didn't wait. He hit the gas and the truck surged forward, crashing through the cluster ahead like a battering ram. Bodies crumpled under the wheels and vanished into the rear view. Only when we were clear did he ease off, chest rising hard with every breath. "We can't stay," he muttered, his eyes locked on the road. "Need somewhere with fewer people, fewer infected. Ah, there's a forest from here. Shouldn't be far. Might buy us some time." I just nodded, staring out into the night. Road out of Farmington was a graveyard. Burnt-out cars, flipped rigs, smashed windows. The aftermath of mass panic. But then the chaos thinned and open road returned. Empty farms rolled past in the silence. Fires flickered in the distance. Orange beacons of destruction burning under a black sky. The farther we got from town, the fewer infected we saw, only shadows now. The kind that watch but don't move. And eventually Kurt slowed. A cricket's wooden sign appeared at the roadside. State Forest. Once meant for hiking and campfires, but tonight it was just the least dangerous place left to hide. Kurt eased the truck onto a dirt path. The road wound through thick woods, tires crunching gravel. Trees loomed on both sides, their branches clawing the sky and blotting out what little light remained. After a few tense minutes, we hit a clearing. A ranger station stood there dark and quiet like the forest itself was holding its breath. Kurt killed the lights, stepped out with his flashlight and crept forward. This door hung open as well, busted hinges creaking in the wind. He paused, then went in. I followed, shutting the door behind us. Inside was still, dusty, but untouched, intact enough to feel like shelter. Kurt checked the radio. Nothing but static. We locked the windows, barricaded the door with whatever we could find, and then sat in the dark, breathing heavily, staring into nothing, trying to figure out what the hell would come next. Out in the woods, the distant moans of the infected bled through the trees now and then, soft, but sharp enough to remind us we weren't safe. Not really, just hiding in a wooden box, waiting for daylight. Morning was still hours away. Until then, there was nothing left to do but sit in the dark, eyes wide open, hearts wired, hoping the sun would bring something other than death. We both knew the truth. Dry Mesa was just the prologue. The real story was out there. Cities falling like dominoes. The world eating itself alive. The ranger station creaked around us. The old wood groaning under its weight, camouflaging darker sounds slithering in from the trees. Kurt and I sat motionless, flashlights off, letting the darkness swallow us. Every window, every door we'd blocked with desks, chairs, whatever we could drag. But it wasn't enough. The thin walls may as well have been paper. We felt exposed. Sleep wasn't happening. Not after what we'd seen. The time crawled by. Hours stretched tight with dread. Then finally, a weak smudge of gray light slipped through the barricade cracks. Dawn. A damn fragile thing, but it was something. Kurt stood slowly and carefully, moved toward one of the covered windows. He lifted the edge of the blanket just an inch, his eyes squinting through the gap. I watched on every muscle wired, waiting for a signal to run or fight. He backed away quietly. "Ah, there's movement," he murmured. "Sambers, maybe a dozen or so. Slow, not onto us yet." That didn't matter. We both knew hiding wasn't a plan. It was merely a pause. Now, we were burning daylight and our supplies were trash. Few cans of food, handful of water bottles, bare bones medical kits. Maybe a couple of days if we stretched it, but nowhere in hell could we stay here. No signal meant no rescue. The radio had already told us the world was burning. G was already shifting gears, brain in survival mode. He pointed to the dusty ranger desk in the corner. Drawers were hanging open and papers were everywhere. Right. We need a way out, he said. Trail maps from anything. I moved over, digging through the mess, files, outdated brochures, broken pencils. Then jackpot, folded trail map, hand-drawn routes snaking through the forest. We spread it out across the desk, fingers tracing the lines, looking for an escape hatch. Kurt tapped one of the thinner trails. Look across the ridge. Run as deep into the hills, he said. Lookout station near the summit. There'll be some gear up there. Emergency radios, flares, maybe even food. It was a long shot, but it was at least a shot. I nodded. Better than rotting in this wooden coffin. We packed what we could carry. Water, medkit, map. Not much, but it'd have to do. Kurt tightened his grip on the fire axe we'd taken from the firehouse back in Farmington. I clenched the flashlight. Solid steel, good for cracking skulls if it came to that. We slid the furniture away from the door. Every scrape allowed in this silence. Kurt opened it slowly, just enough for us to slip into the cold, cruel morning. Well, the morning hit hard. Cold, wet, thick mist curling like smoke through the trees. The forest beyond was dead quiet. Kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. Kurt didn't say a word, just gave a sharp hand signal and we moved fast and low, keeping the ranger station between us and the infected we'd seen lurking earlier. Once we hear the tree line, we picked up speed, following the trail deeper into the woods. The map our only guide. Part 4. Path started climbing fast, winding up through the fog. The air was wet, the mist clinging to our skin like sweat. Our boots hit damp leaves with soft crunches. Every sound cutting through the silence like a blade. About an hour in, Kurt froze. An up-lies locked on something ahead. It was a body, a hiker face down in the mud. Throat ripped and caked in dirt. Dead. No aggression about it. Half hidden in the brush like the woods had tried to bury him. Well, Kurt stepped in slowly, scanning the trees. No signs of movement. The guy hadn't been gone long. The wounds were still raw. Deep bite marks carved into his neck and forearm. Same kind of carnage we'd already seen so many times. Kirk clenched his jaw and turned away. Come on, let's move. The trail got worse the further we went, steep, narrow, and unforgiving. But Kurt didn't slow. He was locked in now, eyes on the path, pushing forward like he was dragging us both by sheer will. Every now and then we catch sight of smoke in the distance. Thin black tendrils rising through the trees. Towns burning, highways in chaos, the world dying just beyond our reach. Time blurred step after step, but then we saw it. The tower rose out from the trees like a skeleton. Wooden steel against the gray sky. Perched at the top of the ridge like it had been waiting for us. Now, hope was a dangerous thing, but it hit us all the same. We crept in, our eyes sharp, scanning for threats. At the base of the tower sat a maintenance shack, abandoned, but intact. Windows were unbroken. The door was locked, but nothing Kurt couldn't handle. One solid kick and we were in. Inside there were shelves with a few cans, bottles of water, some batteries, emergency gear, and a small radio on the desk. It was dead, useless. No signal, so no answers. Kurt grabbed a flare gun hanging near the door just in case. And then we hit the tower. Narrow middle stairs groaned under our weight as the wind picked up, howling the higher we climbed. At the top, Kurt beelined to a bigger radio setup, solar-powered, bolted down. We got to work immediately, flipping switches, turning dials, jumping between frequencies. The forest stretched out below us, green, endless, and beautiful in a way that now felt wrong. Columns of smoke stabbed through the canopy. The towns were burning, and the highways were swarmed. It wasn't a view, it was a warning. Then static, a flicker, a voice. Faint, tired, but real. This is emergency broadcast from the Arizona National Guard base. We're compromised, but operational. Survivors advised to proceed immediately to secure location. Repeat, proceed immediately. Evacuation helicopters departing daily at 1,600 hours from the main helipad. Expect heavy infected presence in surrounding areas. Kurt checked his watch fast. Yeah, if we move now, we might make it before the choppers leave. It was a gamble, but our best shot. No time to waste. Well, we tore down the tower, grabbed whatever supplies we could carry, and hit the eastern trail. Our boots pounding the earth, racing the clock toward the Arizona base and whatever hope was left. We pushed harder, our pace turning into a dead run. The weight of exhaustion clawing at our limbs, but adrenaline and sheer will kept us moving. By mid-afternoon, we'd broken out of the forest and onto the open roads. It was a graveyard. Cars abandoned in every direction, doors wide open, suitcases spilled, blood stains dried on cracked windshields. The infected wandered like ghosts, aimless, but dangerous. We slipped around them where we could, and when we couldn't, we fought. G's fire axe tore through flesh with brutal efficiency. My flashlight, now dented and stained, had become a hammer in my grip, silent, quick, and deadly. The sun dipped low, and then we heard it. The low thunder of rotor blades rolling across the sky. We looked up. There it was, the Arizona base, silhouetted against the burning horizon, half lit by flares and emergency floodlights. Helicopters circled like vultures, dropping low, scooping up survivors and then blasting off again into the smoke-choked sky. Relief hit us like a jolt of electricity, but it was short-lived. Between us and that base lay a hellscape. We didn't slow down. We couldn't. The infected swarm drawn to the noise and lights. We cut through them, navigating shattered pavement and the wreckage of failed escapes. Kurt was fully locked in, his jaw set, his eyes forward, his focus never broke. And I followed, pulse pounding like a war drum in my chest. Closer now. Almost there. But the closer we got, the worse it got. Chaos around the base like a noose. The infected were coming from everywhere, pouring in from the fields and tree lines, attracted by the noise, the movement, the last breath of civilization fighting to hold on. The base was in sight, but still out of reach. The final stretch would be a gauntlet. We looked at each other, said no words, just gave one last nod. We ran. Well, the noise was deafening now. Choppers above, wind thrashing, gunfire cracking through the smoke. The scent of fuel ash and blood filled our lungs. Soldiers were positioned behind armored trucks, taking calm, deliberate shots. But it was clear this was a last stand, not a rescue mission. The fence was torn in places, and some sections lay twisted flat from desperate vehicles smashing through them. Fires burned along the road. Trash clothes. Entire cars lit up in orange and black. Bodies everywhere. Some infected, some not. We ducked and weaved through the wreckage, slipping between gutted sedans and overturned trucks. Half-dozen infected broke from a side alley. We didn't stop. We didn't look back. We just ran harder. By the time we hit the last stretch, it felt like the world was collapsing behind us. Kurt had surged ahead and was yelling, waving his arms to get the soldiers' attention as bullets cracked overhead and the infected pressed closer from every direction. We were out of time and out of options. The gates were still just out of reach. The soldier near the gate whipped his rifle toward us, eyes scanning fast. 1 second, maybe 2, and he saw we weren't infected. He jerked his arm toward the open gate. Move. "Move your asses," he yelled, voice ragged with fatigue and panic. Kurt bolted and I chased him, lungs on fire, legs running on fumes. Just past the gate, the helipad was lit up like daylight, harsh floodlights cutting through the gloom. A massive Chinook waited there, rotors spinning hard, the back ramp dropped. Survivors swarmed it, desperate gunfire exploded behind us again. The soldiers at the gate unloaded into the next wave of infected tearing across the field. Well, there was no time to look back. We sprinted toward the bird, past others who were limping, screaming, bleeding. The Chinook's engines roared, drowning out everything but the pounding in my chest. Soldiers at the ramp barked orders and waved people aboard, their eyes darting between us and the growing mob closing in behind. Gu reached the ramp first, then turned and grabbed my arm and yanked me up. Together, we stumbled inside. Well, inside was chaos. The air stank of sweat, fuel, and fear. Survivors were crammed together, clutching whatever they'd managed to carry. Bags, backpacks, each other. Faces were smeared with dirt, blood, and were wide-eyed and silent under the harsh interior lights. We pushed toward the side, pressed ourselves against a bulkhead, making space as more bodies crammed in. The soldiers barked to each other, shouting over the noise, glancing constantly at the ramp. Outside, the infected were pouring through the fence now, overwhelming the outer defenses like a flood. Gunfire cracked faster and more desperate now. Then, one soldier turned, climbed in, and slammed his fist against the wall. "Go, go now," he roared, and the ram slammed shut behind him. The Chinook lurched, the engine screamed, and the floor trembled beneath our boots. Slowly, then faster, the bird lifted off, tilting as it climbed into the smoky air. Through the side windows, the base dropped away. The perimeter was lost. Soldiers falling back, some overrun. The fences vanished under the swarm. The Arizona base was done. We kept climbing higher and the world opened up below and it looked wrecked. Fires burned everywhere. Small towns, farms, forests, highways were frozen with dead cars, metal tombstones stretching as far as the eye could see. Towns looked abandoned, blacked out, gone. Well, Dry Mesa wasn't the end. It's just the opening act. Inside the chopper, things quieted. Survivors sat still, dazed, not speaking, just breathing, just existing, processing what laid outrun. Kurt slumped back, chest heaving, his face pale, close his eyes for a second, maybe the first moment of peace in days. Then he looked at me. "Oh, we made it," he said, barely above a whisper. But his voice had no triumph in it, only truth. "But this shit's everywhere now." Didn't answer. I couldn't. Just stared out of the window at the inferno below. Then the pilot's voice came through the comms, clear and steady like the world hadn't just ended. "Attention all personnel, we're en route to staging zones in Nevada. Medical support will be awaiting on arrival. Stay seated and remain calm." Calm. There was no calm anymore, only survival. The pilot's announcement came through steady, almost comforting, but it rang hollow. Both Kurt and I knew better. Nevada secure. That was a fantasy. We'd seen how fast everything could fall apart. Fortified zones didn't mean a damn thing when the infection came knocking. After an hour of uneasy flight, the Chinook finally dipped low, descending toward a lit-up air base below. Flares burned red against the dark. Emergency lights highlighting rows of temporary tents and makeshift shelters. Hundreds of survivors moved like ghosts inside a fenced perimeter, herded by soldiers trying to keep control, trying to look like they had answers. The bird touched down softer than expected. As the ramp dropped, a rush of cool night air cut through the stifling tension inside the cargo hold. We all moved fast, following barked orders, feet hitting the tarmac hard. Kurt paused just for a heartbeat, looking back at the helicopter, then up at the sky. Stars were sharp and cold above us, unmoving, uncaring. For one strange second, it felt peaceful, like the rest of the universe hadn't noticed the world was burning. Medics met us halfway, guiding us toward triage tents. Inside it was organized chaos, though people moaning, crying, staring blankly at nothing. The nurses moved fast, handing out blankets, food, water, anything to stabilize the bodies, not the minds, though. Kurt took a bottle of water with shaky hands, downed half of it in one long gulp. Then he turned to me, his voice low. "Eyes up," he said. "This place feels safe, but it's not. You stay sharp and stick close." I gave him a nod. He didn't need to say any more. Dry Mesa, Farmington, the woods. Every mile had been a lesson in how quickly everything could go to hell. Around us, people sat in silence, shell-shocked, shivering, eyes hollowed out from grief. Every single one of them had lost something, someone, their safety, their sanity, their home. Some had physical wounds, others wore their scars on the inside. We ended up in a corner of the main tent, wrapped in blankets that barely held back the chill. Soldiers patrolled outside, rifles in hand, scanning the darkness like they were expecting something to crawl out of it at any second. And maybe they were right. Kurt sat beside me, not saying a word. Eyes shut but not asleep. He was listening. Always listening. Thought about Dry Mesa. The facility was supposed to be untouchable. A safe zone. The last line. He was the first to fall. That's where it had all started. Where the lie of control cracked wide open. And now we were just scattered survivors in a world that didn't want us anymore. The first light of morning crept across the sky, pale and slow. Kurt opened his eyes and stared at it like it might have an answer to a question he didn't know how to ask. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "Well, we made it," he said. Not with joy, not with pride, just a fact. Maybe it was for me, maybe it was for himself. We are still breathing. That has to count for something. And it did, at least for now. The world had flipped and normal was gone. Safety was a myth, but we were alive together, watching and waiting. Dry Mesa had taught us how fragile civilization really was. The Arizona base had showed us humanity still had teeth, even backed against a wall. But deep down, we both knew the truth. This wasn't the end. This was the first chapter in a new nightmare. Survival wasn't a victory. It was a challenge. The tents around us filled the light of a new day. No warmth in it, just exposure. And Kurt and I sat there, back straight, eyes forward, ready, awake. Whatever came next, we'd face it head on. So, my dear friends, you seem to be enjoying these zombie outbreak stories. They seem to be sort of mildly interconnected but happening in different places. So, I'm not sure what's going on. But hopefully the author will keep pumping these out. There were sort of hints that they were interconnected. Mentions of certain places and certain people and things like that. So, let's see where this goes. Thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to say in the comments section below the video. And as ever, I'll do my best to join in the conversation. Well, that's it for this evening.